So, Invincible Season 3 is finally fully out, and damn, what a season. And I honestly think this season stacks well against Season 1, but there's been some very interesting reviews. Regardless of what I think about this season, it still does come with its issues, but I still think overall it delivered what it needed to. Last year I went through all the episodes of Invincible Season 2, and this year I did the same, and if you haven't been caught up, well, this is actually good for you, because here are all my weekly Invincible Season 3 reviews into one big video. If you've already seen these videos, then maybe give it one more try, and if you haven't, hey, my name is Mr. 4K, I really love what I do, and maybe you'll find this a bit more intriguing. I do want to preface and say sometimes I do over-exaggerate my words, and that's mainly because of how hyped I was when I was making these videos, but other than that, enjoy the video.
What you did was not nice!
To no surprise whatsoever, the first 3 episodes of Season 3 are absolutely amazing. The show throws us right back into everything. Episode 1 wastes no time reintroducing us to the world. It doesn't have that slow pace that episode 1 of Season 2 had. This episode straight away goes into Mark training, then setting up Eve and Mark's relationship, then setting up the cracks between Cecil and Mark, and then you have more between Mark and Eve, and it's just all building up and building up and building up. The first episode alone is better than most of Season 2 in my opinion, which puts no hate on Season 2. I thought Season 2 was fantastic. Shut the up. Don't even just shut the fuck. I think my favorite part about this episode, and I'll say it in every video that I talk about Invincible, is it's just Mark's struggle. His struggle seems so real, man. Just the nerves of trying to talk to this girl, and it just hurts every time. And then once the conversation begins, you're trying not to make it awkward, and then it's not awkward, then it becomes awkward again. It just hurts. There are some moments of cute shine where, like, example, Mark and Oliver are playing in the backyard, and then Oliver just shits out powers, and it's all really nice stuff, but then you get through the real parts of Invincible. Episode 1 alone, in my opinion, those last like 20 minutes or so were amazing. Like, that's genuinely where I realized, damn, we are building up to something. Just the way how everything unfolds from Mark not complying well with Eve, then Mark sees the Reaniman, and then he sees Darkwing, and then he starts to snap, and he's just losing it, and then the confrontation at the end of episode 1 is just all so good and all so well paced and all so set up. But episode 1 was such a nice tone setter for episode 2, because episode 2 goes down in the history books for one of the greatest pieces of media I've ever watched. This show is fantastic without a bitch in your ear telling you, oh, the animation sucks. I don't want to hear anyone complaining about the animation after these first 3 episodes, because I thought they nailed it. I thought it looked fantastic, and I honestly thought they greatly improved over Season 2. And I can prove it alone with just Cecil's backstory. But Cecil's origin is so nice and so well made, and it helps just that further rivalry between Mark and himself build up. Because I love the idea that Cecil is pretty much who Mark is right now, and they had these opposing ideologies, and now that these opposing ideologies have built up, they get to fight now. I really like that Cecil knows what Mark is talking about. He understands what he means, but now that he's grown older and he's understood what Director Redcliffe was talking about, he knows that Mark needs to understand that you can either be the good guys or the guys that save the world. And these two ideologies kind of go back and forth in this episode. Because you have Mark, who is trying to be the good guy here. He knows he's the good guy here, because why would you work with a murderer? Why would you work with a psychopath? But these people can be the people who save the world. But obviously, like all things in the show, it is solved by mass murder. And Jesus Christ, what the f***? Holy f***, what was, that was beautiful! Holy shit, what the actual, you were being such a bitch like 2 episodes ago. This alone proved to me that anything anyone says about the show is either for rage bait or them just wanting to get actual clicks on a tweet. The moment this happened, I knew a flip switched in the show. I think it was a switch flipped, or flip switch. I don't know how. The whole confrontation between Mark and Cecil and how their ideologies are opposing and how this ideology further pursues these other characters, I thought worked beautifully. Do I think any one of them is right? That's a very tricky question to answer. The best way to say it, in my opinion, is I think they are both right in their own ways. I think Mark is absolutely right that, yeah, these people should be in prison suffering for their crimes, just as Cecil was suffering in his crimes. But Cecil is also right about people changing and people reforming. The better question is, can these people really change and can they really stay reformed? I think my favorite part of it all is when Mark's suffering on the floor there. You can really feel the suffering with him. Like, you're closing your ears with Mark, and then the team is helping him, and your heart's just racing and racing and racing. And then Robot says the frequency's been blocked, and then all hell is loose. And then from there, the episode just builds and builds and builds. You have Oliver coming up with the idea of killing. He wants to kill people and believes that's the right idea to do. Then you have Eve and Mark. And after all of that, the Guardians have split up. I love seeing that there are parts of them that disagree and parts of them that agree. Even though if I was in that fucking room, I'm throwing hands with Kate and Immortal. Okay, they were and then to wrap it all so nicely is, in the end, you even have Donald questioning if Cecil did the right thing. And again, that question of, you can be the good guy or you can be the guy that saves the world. That quote is forever embedded into my head, and I will say it when I'm taking a shit. I will say it when I'm taking a piss. I will say it when I'm in bed with your mom. I also really like that they felt the need to even bring back the past moments of Nolan when he first came and arrived on Earth, and knowing that Cecil instantly didn't trust him just adds further kind of background to season 1, that rewatching season 1 will feel nicer knowing that Cecil never even trusted Nolan from the beginning. Episode 3 is no exception to all of that. The ramp is getting higher and higher and higher to the point where you can fucking calculate the angle of elevation to this shit. The episode beginning with just this beautiful kind of wrap of ideologies of Mark and Cecil's, of how, look at them, they're reforming, they're changing, they're wanting to become better people. But once again, can they really reform is the question. It's such a beautiful tie to episode 2 because not only does it reaffirm your already questioning mind, but it makes you question even further of who's right. I love that they didn't completely cut out Amber instantly after Mark and her break up, and I like that they're reintroducing her this season. Speaking of reintroducing, we get reintroduced to Titan. He's not in the episode for long, but it's just great to know that he's back and he plays a mini role in the episode because of the events that happen later on. So just to go through the small bits and pieces of episode 3 before talking about the big moments, you get some really nice moments between Oliver and Mark trying to protect Oliver, and Oliver not listening to Debbie or Mark, and then finally starting to train together, and you get these really cute moments of brother and brother moment. But I think the nicest of all the moments in this episode is that Eve has finally remade her relationship with her parents. It's one step further to finally rebuilding something, and I really found that moment to be touching. Not in that way, you fuck. I'm really happy for Debbie in these moments, but I honestly, the more and more we see him, the more I'm convinced by the time Omni-Man's probably back at Earth that Paul is probably gonna get fucking pulverized by him. Oh my god, it's so good. I honestly was shocked by how fast they introduced the blue suit and then instantly cut to something else. I love that they didn't waste time introducing it. Like, I thought it was gonna be this big insane moment, this cool dialogue, all this, but no, Mark puts it on. He's like, yo, you look so amazing, and then it's like, yo, by the way, some idiots are breaking into the fucking Pentagon, but the suit looks so cool. And to add on to it, you have these moments of Mark fighting in the suit and them together, Oliver and Mark. It's just, yeah, it's so cool seeing it, man. Well, at least it was until the very nice and sweet newborn child The moment on screen hits so much harder than a comic panel could ever do, and it's beyond me how a page from years ago could still hit this hard now. I'm never going to fuck with this guy ever again. Holy shit, the aura. I love the way episode 3 ends because it's so many good moments mashed together. You have Oliver just killing the Maulers like it was nothing. And then that infamous moment from the comic books where Oliver asks, "Don't you ever think that Omni-Man was right?" A question that not only the audience have been asking, but a question that Mark himself has probably been asking over the past 2 seasons. Now in the comics, Mark replies and he says sometimes, but here in the show, there's nothing to be answered. And I look at it at 2 ways. One, it's either them wanting us to interpret what Mark genuinely says in the moment. With the silence, you can probably assume that he knows that sometimes Omni-Man was right, you know, like, and you're just too afraid to give that answer. Or 2, potentially a bigger moment happens later on in the season and we get a flashback to this moment where Mark answers the question. Regardless, the moment still hits hard because of what Oliver has done and how he doesn't see the repercussions of taking life. What I love is that this episode takes place right after episode 2, where Mark and Cecil were fighting because Cecil doesn't want to listen to Mark and Mark doesn't want to listen to Cecil, and the same thing happens here. So it puts things into perspective for Mark. To tie it all off, the way the episode ends and the way I'm so excited to just review these episodes week by week to get to the finale, I'm just so hyped. And knowing now that likely episode 8 is going to be the Conquest fight, I'm honestly, I cannot wait till March. And holy shit, that was the 3 episodes. I didn't think I could stop talking, but I eventually did it.
What you did was not nice!
Alright, so basically the week flew by and episode 4 is now out. It's been a very interesting day. We have Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 3, which is TBD. And now episode 4, which is very good. I think one thing that episode 4 really solidified for me is my love for how fast-paced the Invincible episodes are. There's no time wasted. As soon as the episode starts, buckle up because they're not gonna wait for you. They're gonna start the story. They're gonna pick up where they left off. They're not gonna be like, so yeah, here's this bit of info, here's that bit of info. No, they're going right into things. And that's why I really love this episode. They don't waste time. You go from one plot point to another and it all goes seemingly and smoothly into the next. Like you shift from Mark going to Robot to ask him about that camera that Angstrom Levy left, to him assuming that it's Cecil, then him going to Eve, and then him going with Dropkick and Fight Master to the future. All these things happen so fast and so seamless that you think about it, you're like, damn, that's an entire episode. No, it's only been 20 minutes. And a lot of people might look at that like, damn, isn't that really bad though? Like, you should flesh out these stories. No. The great thing about Invincible is that it sets up these stories. We've seen Dropkick and Fight Master in episode 1, but here we are in episode 4 finishing and wrapping up that part of the story. We've seen Cecil and Mark fight. Now here's a bit more drama between them with Mark breaking into the Pentagon. And obviously we've seen Mark and Eve develop over these first 3 episodes, and now here we are with their first date. I really love how unhinged Mark is in the blue suit. It's like whenever he puts that on, shit flips. Like without any hesitation, man breaks into the Pentagon, unhinges his jaw, bites a reanimant, and then fights everyone. Which little side note, how the fuck is no one else affected by the sound beam except for Mark? Like, that is a public speaker. You guys should be like dying right now. One thing I really love about this scene is even though it's little crumbs of Cecil and Mark, it still adds so much tension because it's Cecil not even wanting to get near Mark, and Mark just looks like a terrifying presence among all of them. In casual Invincible fashion, they have these mini stories in some of the episodes that are just entertaining to watch and add a lot more to the characters. Dropkick and Fight Master were characters that you probably didn't care much about in episode 1, but in episode 4, they're really well used. But I think the standout of the episode, especially in that first half, is just the confrontation that Mark and King Immortal have. I really love that they lean into the idea of what happens to a man that lives for so long and how it breaks you as a human. This man has lived for so many centuries that he doesn't even remember his own wife that he is engaged to right now. It really shows you and humanizes such a weird character in the show, a man that usually just acts on his own morals but now wants to die and gets killed in very brutal fashion. Which I recorded a video about who's right, Mark or Cecil, and this episode really just does not help Mark's case. Like, I get Immortal wanted to die here, but like, you still killed him. But one thing that this episode really proved to me is that the animation, in my opinion, is genuinely getting better. I really loved a lot of the shots in this episode, especially the very nice lighting throughout the future sections of the episodes, and especially the second half of the episode. Mark and Eve has finally cemented itself to be one of my favorite on-screen superhero romances in just 4 episodes. It's a very natural love, in my opinion. They wasted no time with these big moments between each other, and I love how the show will not waste your time with them, because you know how these type of ordeals go, so they just want to get these basic traits of love stories out of the way so we can get into the very juicy stuff of the relationship. Battle Beast returning is just an absolute win, and props to the voice actor because he did a fantastic job. The prison break is 1,000,000% the best part of the episode, and hands down is the saving grace for the Nolan plot, because I was getting very annoyed by the fact that we were just seeing him in the prison for the last like 7 episodes. Just the brutality and the choreography and the animation in this entire section just left me mind blown. Nolan's slow redemption is also growing, and I'm really just enjoying the on-screen moments between Nolan and Alan, and I love how they helped each other in the fight, and I love how Battle Beast was just a fucking brute in the background of all of it. Similar to season 2 episode 3, they brought back the narration of the Alan episode, and I just love it, and I hope they keep bringing it back every season. But ending off the episode with very important intel as to what could happen for the future of the seasons, with Nolan telling us that this is valuable information and that the Viltrumites are low on recruits and that there are only 50 Viltrumites left. There's so much great stuff to take in from this one episode, and I genuinely truly love it. I can't say if this is my favorite one yet, but it is a very strong debate between episode 2 and episode 4 for me right now, because I really just enjoyed this episode. But yeah, those are my thoughts on episode 4. What did you guys think of episode 4 of season 3? Did y'all enjoy it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was mid? Let me know below.
What you did was not nice!
Alright, so episode 5 of Invincible is out, and I think for the most part it is definitely the weakest episode of the season. To me, this episode does feel like a very weird comic issue where the plot doesn't really move, but it's more or less here to kind of close off a certain part of the comic. Regardless, I think the core aspects of what this season has really been strong for still are here and present in this episode. Mark and Eve's relationship continues to be probably one of the best parts of the season, and you get to see a lot more of them this episode. They are together for literally 99% of the episode. Especially after Mark planted the seed last episode, you do get to see a lot more of them, especially in kind of the weird light. I really love the jokes where Oliver and Debbie are making fun of them for invincibling it, but I digress. But no joke, they literally are the best part of the episode. You get to go into part of the comics where they're talking about the Invincible Inc., where it's basically Mark and Eve work for the prison Peyton Penitentiary, and you get to see a lot more of them working together, really deciding how fast they're going as a couple and deciding to slow down. And I really like that the show itself notices that, because I've seen people going like, damn, y'all just got together like an episode ago and y'all already doing the deed. Thankfully, Oliver and Debbie return in this episode, as they were kind of missed in episode 4 And all over this episode is becoming a lot more interesting. I didn't think they were gonna go with this route with his character, but I'm curious to see what it does mean for his overall arc in the season, because they're treating him as a kid now, finally, after literally what he did in episode 3. Like that didn't happen, I guess. But I guess moving into the main parts of the episode, I really do like how the episode is more self-contained. Sure, it doesn't do much for the plot, and it does heavily slow down in pacing. Regardless, I think it's still a fun episode. Like, I don't think it's bad. To say an Invincible episode is bad is really hard, because they still continue to make episodes where you're having fun, you're intrigued, there are a lot of things going on, and the characters are still moving regardless of the main plot, if there's anything consequential or not. Like, the opening for this episode has like one of my favorite openings to the Invincible episodes like ever. Like, this scene is beyond messed up, and I just love it. I'm really intrigued with Multipol's character, because I'm not sure exactly where they're going with his character, because this episode does slightly emphasize their backstory, Paul and Kate, and you're kind of intrigued with how they're going to go this season. Especially with the way the episode ends, I'm curious to know where this eventually takes us by the end of the season. But I think the best part about the episode is, regardless or not if it's consequential, it still carries the moral dilemma that this season is holding. Mark, even after his fight with Cecil, still continues to help the bad guys, even after telling Cecil to himself that I don't work with criminals and all these things, etc., he still manages to prove himself wrong. And I think that's just the beauty of these smaller side episodes, is that regardless or not if the plot is moving, the moral idea is still there and it's still brewing. And I like that they decided to do that in a Titan episode, because Titan is one of my favorite characters in the show, and his last episode in season 1 was, yes, kind of inconsequential, same like this episode, but they both felt so strong, because it just felt like an episode where it didn't need to move the plot, and it just needed to be like a good self-contained story. Though I do think that this episode can kind of get out of hand with how it's written. Mr. Liu is kind of a goofy character in my opinion, and the whole idea of the order works, but I wish it was presented a bit better. Machine Head makes a return in this episode and is kind of the back character of the episode until like the very end, where he comes back. As always, he's just funny and he's just Machine Head. So like, yeah, that honestly gets a +1 for me. I can't believe I realized this now, but I never talked about Rex and Ray, especially in episode 4. I really love what they're doing with Rex and Ray, especially Shrinking Ray, because her character just dies after the Lizard League fight, and they never do anything with her character in the comics. But in the show, I really love the direction they're taking. Again, it's a really nice self-contained story that continues to go as the season goes on, and it just gets better and better every time. Just these small moments between each other in the episodes, it's just really nice. But this episode kind of made an interesting choice with cutting out a certain story. In the comics, there's a specific issue where it goes into how Mark is very worried about Amber, because Amber's new boyfriend, who is hinted at in this season, is very abusive to her. Now, I could be wrong, and this could happen in the next episode, but I don't think that really aligns with what happens in the comics, because this story is supposed to happen before the whole Titan story unfolds. So I'm pretty sure they cut it out completely, and I kind of agree with cutting it out. Amber in the comics is very much different to her character in the show, so it wouldn't really align with her character in the show. But I think the best part about that story, and why I'm kind of sad that they cut it out, is it again emphasizes Mark's moral dilemma. I really love the last kind of like 15 minutes of the episode. Just the whole action sequence in the prison is some of the most creative fight scenes we've seen in the show, especially with Eve and Mark teaming up together. Again, like, how can you not just watch this and have a smirk on your face? And the episode kind of ends in a weird way where Titan pretends like he got betrayed by Isotope, but he doesn't really get betrayed, and then they actually make a whole scheme on Mr. DU, and they end up kind of killing him off, and then Machine Head becomes the leader of the Order, and then it's even though he's not dead, and they literally show us he's alive at the end of the episode. Overall, I really enjoyed the episode. Just the moments between Mark and Eve, and them watching Oliver as he's kind of taking an interesting route in his character. I love seeing the whole Titan story unfold, and how his story is very much grounded, and you love to see these higher up characters like Invincible go grounded and see how the world truly is. Yes, the episode was not extremely consequential, but for a self-contained story, I think they still did a good enough job. But it is definitely the weakest of the season. There are 3 episodes remaining, and they still really haven't touched on the fact that Angstrom Levy is back, kind of worrying me as to I think that entire story will unfold in episode 7. And episode 6 will be completely about Powerplex. Still, I'm very excited to see how season 3 unfolds. Episode 6, 7, and 8 are probably going to be the best in the entire show. Just knowing what will eventually happen by the end of the season gets me so excited. But what did you guys think of episode 5? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Or somewhere around the middle? Let me know everything about episode 5 in your opinion. And yeah, I'm just gonna go lock myself in a room till next week. All right, bye.
What you did was not nice!
So episode 6 is finally out, and I'm a bit late because it's been a very interesting week. But unsurprisingly, episode 6 is a fantastic episode and may be my favorite of the season thus far. As soon as Aaron Paul was casted as Powerplex in this episode, I was like, yeah, this one is instantly gonna be my most hyped episode of the season. And absolutely it was. There was just something about the episode, the way it plays out, the way it's paced, and how the story is told that really leaves you shocked by the end of it and makes you feel like, wow, that was actually like fantastic, as it should have been. Powerplex is such a tragic and sad character because you see a villain in the promotion, but then when you watch the season, you're like, what the actual hell? Again, this episode, the moral dilemma is still a massive factor of this entire season, and this episode in particular really tests those morals. Powerplex and Mark are the same characters. They are literally in the same situation, and I just feel so bad when watching the episode, because some might say, wow, Powerplex is an idiot for doing this and that, but it's so depressing because look at the lengths he's going to because of this one act. It's more sad than it is dumb. Just that entire like last 10 minutes of Mark and Powerplex confronting each other, heartbreaking. The fact that Mark suffered the worst day of his life on that day, and that Powerplex or Scott suffered the same thing as well and considers that the worst day of his life that made him get to where he is now, is even sadder. The episode does bring up a lot of interesting questions of why do humans face the consequences of actions such as these, but when superheroes do it, they just fly by. Because yeah, absolutely, it is true. How can Mark break into the Pentagon, leave perfectly fine, live happily, but if anyone else does it, they get the death sentence? And you really do see Mark challenging himself and his own morals, really questioning that if Powerplex did do something here, then that would also have been his fault because he caused Powerplex to be who he is. So there's a weird kind of science of it all where in the end of the episode where the tragedy does happen, and I'm beyond shocked, you're kind of sitting there like, wow, so is this kind of Mark's fault? Because yeah, sure, that sounds dumb. Can it really be Mark's fault? Like, he didn't mean to let that happen, but it happened because of the events that happened with his dad. So there's a lot of ways to look at it morally, and it depends on you as a person and how you think to decide that. But just the outcry from Aaron Paul playing Powerplex, like the sheer emotion from all of his voice lines. I don't think there's a single bad voice line that he did in this episode, and that's just a testament to how good he is as a voice actor and an actor in general. I don't even think it was just Aaron Paul that made the character so great. Powerplex as a character is extremely interesting in my opinion. The tragic nature to his character and how depressing it is to see him fail repeatedly in the entire episode, to the point where he thinks he succeeded and then he ends up failing. You feel bad for both sides, not just Powerplex but for Mark. It's a really depressing episode that a lot of people will probably overlook because they think this might be filler, because it's not something that entirely pushed the story forward, but this pushed our characters, in my opinion, to another level. There's a lot of road work done in the episode to kind of close a lot of the arcs off and to set up new ones for the final 2 episodes. Robot finally being able to cure Amanda of her curse and an actual explanation behind it. I'm glad that they didn't just give her like this dumb belt and go like, yo, put this belt on and you'll be fine. Rex and Ray obviously getting together is great, but I don't know why. I have this terrible feeling that this relationship will probably not play out well. And then most importantly, you really do get a lot more info of Oliver and Mark's relationship together. This moral dilemma between, is my father the good person that I knew as a kid, or is he that Viltrumight that wanted to take over the world? And Oliver does stand by the fact that, no, he's my dad. He did the right thing. He's a great person, because he doesn't have those memories of what he did on Earth. And you always kind of look back at the moment that Oliver asks him, don't you ever think dad was right? And you can kind of see Mark always thinking about it. You can definitely tell that he's constantly thinking about that moment, and especially of his father's actions. And actions is kind of the best word to sum up the entire episode. The actions of a lot of characters lead to a lot of things, and a lot of it is tragedy and depression, but it still ends up being such a great episode. And obviously, how can I even forget to mention that absolutely crazy cliffhanger of an episode? Angstrom Levy is finally back, showing himself completely, and he is somehow completely repaired after what Mark did to him. But obviously, most importantly, the Invincible War is finally here. And I'm honestly depressed that we couldn't just get one moment of happiness as a community, because the moment I step on social media, people are instantly like, oh, they lost Aura, oh, they don't look that great. These are literally one-to-one copies of how they looked like in the comic. I don't get why so many people complain. Hell, I'll go the extra mile. I thought the animation looked absolutely fantastic in this episode. There's a reoccurring pattern where you can tell that they really focus on specific episodes to make them look great, while they leave the budget out of some of them so they can save it for the greater episodes. Obviously, some smaller stuff happens in the episode where you get a bit more between Amber and Mark, because Amber is back with her new boyfriend, and you kind of see Mark connecting with her new boyfriend because it's extremely different to the comic. You do see a lot of relationships growing between Mark and Eve. You see Rex and Shrinking Ray kind of having the same moral dilemma as Paul and Debbie. Just a great overall episode that might not push the story insanely further for some people, but it does push our characters extremely forward. The only negative I have to say is that the Guardians of the Globe are honestly the most useless heroes in the entire world. Like, this was probably a broadcasted thing on the news and none of them came. None of the Guardians decided, oh wait, maybe we should do our job. And yeah, episode 6 was absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait for episode 7 and 8, and I will probably do reactions to those. So, what did you guys think of the episode? If you did not like it, then you are a poopy, farty head, stinky butt. I'm joking about that. I think you're really nice. And yeah, I'm just gonna go now. So goodbye.
What you did was not nice.
So episode 7 is out, and that was the greatest piece of fiction I've ever watched. I cannot stress enough that this is literally the best episode in the entire show thus far. The Invincible War is finally adapted after so long, after such a painful wait to get here, and it was top to bottom perfection. I've seen comments online of people saying, oh, it's not this, it's not that, it's not that. You could watch the episode and read the comic at the same time, and they are literally word for word, panel for panel, the exact same thing. They absolutely did justice to this entire storyline, and in my opinion also elevated it a bit more. The introduction of Rex and Ray's relationship really helps the Invincible War, especially because of the rest in peace to my goat. It was honestly the best addition to season 3 and to the comics that I've seen thus far in the entire show. One thing I'm entirely shocked by is, yes, the Invincible War is short. It only lasts a single issue in the comics, but I didn't think they would do it this good and this well paced in a single episode. They managed to hit every single beat. They managed to give every single big moment its time to shine, and they gave every single Mark variant a moment to shine. Steven Yeun put on a generational performance in this episode, literally voicing 18 Mark variants, each with their own voice and different personality. I honestly hope we get to see more of the Mark variants because they were absolutely amazing. I loved each one of them, and I love how funny they are together as a group. I honestly wouldn't mind a spin-off show with just them in the dead Earth, just being Mark. I love all the cool moments you get with each Mark variant. You can feel they're really dangerous, and you get to see how much distinct they have to each other. The Mohawk Invincible is an easy standout. I just love the performance Steven Yeun gives to him. It's such a fun Mark variant, and you can kind of hear the assholiness in his voice, along with so many of the other variants. So many of them did fantastic, and I love all of them. Obviously, the big shocking moments with them, with Eve getting injured, were like, what the hell? My biggest praise is they managed to make an episode that I don't know how most people considered filler into a very important episode. I hate that until now, people have yet to understand that this season is about a moral dilemma. Every episode, even the big ones such as this, the Invincible War, still carries that moral dilemma. Even though in the entire episode you can see Mark is trying to do the right thing, in the end he still blames himself and he still gets blamed. Mark is again put in the same situation that he was put at in the last season and even in the beginning of this season, with the chance to kill Angstrom Levy. And you see this moment happen, and you see Oliver in the back of his head, and it's just, you're waiting to see if it happens. And it doesn't happen, but you question if it will happen soon. Will Mark snap? Obviously, the easy standouts are Mark and Eve's relationship. Once again, Debbie does a great job, even though she's not in the episode for way too long. I love that Debbie still has this great presence, and you can still kind of feel her throughout the entire episode. I also love that pretty much every character, not just the ones we know, but every character in the Invincible universe gets a moment to shine in this episode. It's crazy to me how this is a episode 7 and not a finale. This show is genuinely amazing and has great work if you don't have a bitch in your ear complaining about it every 3 seconds. And I want to see where those complainers are at, because genuinely, in my opinion, this episode looked fantastic and is fantastic. They weren't lying when they said they were saving the budget for the last 2 episodes, because this frame alone is the single greatest frame in the entire show. I honestly would go as far as to say I think this is the best animated episode in the entire show. So many creative action sequences with great choreography and just smooth animation. Love how the colors pop off each other, and I just think in general every scene, every big moment looked great. I love that we finally get to see Cecil and Mark together, and I love that now that they're back together, you kind of get to see how they are after things have settled a bit. You can kind of see that both of them are making their minds up. They see how far things went when the interaction happened, so you kind of see a more peaceful interaction between them. And honestly, by the end of the episode, I am curious to see what they do with Cecil and Mark. I'm curious if they will kind of go back to the somewhat normal relationship, especially with the way the episode tries to end off with Mark being the leader of the Guardians, but him rejecting it, but still thanking Cecil. Just a couple of more things before getting into the bigger things. I love that Wolfman was introduced here and Tech Jacket. They're characters that are very important, especially Tech Jacket. Wolfman does have 2 issues in the comics. That doesn't happen in this season. I don't know why that decision was made, but it will probably get moved to next season. There's a really weird, interesting moment between Mark and Eve's parents. I don't get if the scene is trying to show us that Eve was right about her parents to Mark, that like it's not that she doesn't want to show Mark to her parents, it's just her parents are very bad people. The biggest hater of all time. Don't get me wrong, that opening was sick. Just getting to see how Angstrom looked like after the fight was cool. But genuinely, the biggest hater of all time. Bro not only teamed up with variants of the person he wanted to kill, but then managed to fumble his team up and said like,
"Oh, damn, I didn't expect it to happen this soon."
To then get folded by Mark minutes later. Which, by the way, that entire sequence is one of the best animated sequences in the entire show. The fact that they managed to adapt that fight and make it much longer and much better in the show just goes to show how good the show is adapting. Look, I like Angstrom's character and I think he's played perfectly, but genuinely there are times where I hate him, and this is one of those times. I'm very curious to see what Angstrom does next in the show, as he's not gone, he's with the technicians now, and it's a very ambiguous kind of ending for the character right now. But yes, the moment you've been waiting for, after 8 minutes, holy shit. My brain still can't fathom the fact that Conquest is in the show right now. Someone at Prime Video did this ironically, casting Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Conquest, knowing that he killed Steven Yeun's character in The Walking Dead. This is gonna be the greatest rematch in all of television. Now, I know people are gonna bring up the fact of, oh, I wish they did this, I wish they did that. But me personally, I think, again, the animation looked great in this scene, and I thought everything leading up to the scene was great, just really showing you there is no breaks in this episode and Mark's life doesn't get easier. But my bigger point is, it has nothing to do with the scene overall, it's more or less to do with Jeffrey Dean Morgan's voice. Now, personally, I kind of do like the voice, I do like it, but I understand why some people might feel iffy and even disappointed from the voice. I will mention that I do think a lot of us got used to those like TikTok edits with the AI Conquest voice, and that kind of has a bit of bias when it comes to the actual voice of Conquest. Personally, I see what they're trying to do with his voice. Obviously, like, I can't base too much off of it. We barely even heard him. It was like 30 seconds of dialogue, but from what I'm hearing, I can see that they're trying to lean into the Conquest that wants to have a fun time with his opponent. A lot of people will expect Conquest to be gritty and old, which is what I personally expected, but knowing what this fight will mean for the character and the show, I don't think this is entirely bad. Jeffrey Dean Morgan has that perfect voice for a killer that wants to have a fun time. Literally watch The Walking Dead and you'll know what I mean. It's more or less like he sounds like he's gonna play with his food, if that makes sense. And regardless or not of the voice, just hearing the line, "Stand ready for my arrival, worm," like, goosebumps, literally goosebumps. I have been holding back reading this part of the comics just because I want to experience it all in animated form. And now that it's finally here, holy shit! I love the little changes that they made to the dialogue and the overall scene. I do wish the scene had that kind of exaggerated blue lighting from the comics, but I get why it's not like that in the show. But other than that, I thought Conquest's introduction was really, really cool, man. I don't get the hate sometimes online. I swear to God, some people, I can't tell if they do it for rage bait or they genuinely mean what they're trying to say, but I just don't get it. Conquest is finally here. I can't wait for next week. This is going to be the longest week of my life, and I think they did a great job with introducing him. Yeah, hi, 4K editor here. I just had a bit more things to say, so let me carry on. I love that they recreated this single panel from the comics. It's such a powerful image, and seeing it translated in the show with Oliver with him helps it a lot better. As usual, I obviously do see complaints online, and there are a lot of critiques online, which of course there is. It's normally going to be critiques and criticism, but I've never seen criticism feel so lifeless. The past 2 weeks, I'd say, episode 5 and 6, the only thing people have been saying is either it's filler or this does nothing and nothing happened in the episode. And then finally, when things happen in the episode, people start complaining. I'm legit seeing the same people who were complaining a week ago about nothing happening. Now that there is something happening, they're like, oh, too much happened, oh, the pacing was off, oh, I didn't like that there was so much. That is quite literally the best part about the Invincible War. It's not about the war itself. The war lasts like maybe 6 pages in the comics. The best part about the war isn't the war, it's the events that happen afterwards. Seeing people online saying that they felt so overwhelmed, so much happened, is so perfect because that is literally what the show wanted you to feel. Mark doesn't deserve a break, and neither does the audience, because the war is over, the aftermath begins, and you think the rebuilding begins, but then Conquest comes in. Which, now that we're talking about Conquest, let's get into a bit of things that people have been saying. So I'm just gonna say it for what it is. The fanbase are hypocrites. Ever since this photo of Jeffrey Dean Morgan was released on his Insta, everyone was like, yes, he's gonna play Conquest, yes, he's gonna play Conquest, that's such a sick casting. But then when it happens, everyone is like, oh, no one wanted this, oh, the AI sounds so much better, what is this, he sounds so old, he sounds so raspy. Look, I get that they fumbled the stand ready for my arrival worm, like, I won't deny that, I thought the line could have been so much better. But to straight up say the voice is garbage is crazy. He wasn't even in the show for a full 2 minutes. This is a minute and maybe 10 seconds of footage, and people have already made up their minds. And same goes with his design. I'm seeing people already bashing it, and all I'm thinking about is like, damn, it's kind of ironic that people did the exact same thing with this episode, the Invincible War, and then wow, look, everyone is loving it. They did it with Angstrom's design, and they did it with the Invincible War teaser. Everyone hated it, but then when the episode came out, everyone flipped. I'm not denying criticism, and I know that's the first thing someone's gonna say. Oh, you're an Invincible Glazer. Oh, you Invincible fans can't accept criticism. But it's just not criticism. Y'all are just whining at that point. Conquest looks like the character he is based off. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is gonna do a great job, and let's all just hope for the best for the next episode. I don't know why people are preying on the show's downfall or pretending like it's terrible when it quite literally isn't. It is easily the best superhero show on as of now. But yeah, you can call me whatever you want. I just think it's really annoying that the fan base is like this. No one's ever happy, and with an episode this good, you'd expect everyone to be on board, but once you hop on Twitter or TikTok, you just instantly get a mood downer. I really recommend, if you do love the show, just don't go on TikTok and Twitter, because they will just ruin your mood, because you're on that hype train. You're like, wow, that was such a sick episode, and you want to discuss it with everyone, and you start posting, you start going on TikTok, you start going on Twitter, and then you realize there are just bums online who are going to complain about every single thing. There are literal comments online about people complaining that, oh, Conquest doesn't have wrinkles on his forehead. Garbage design. I wish I was making this up. If a pair of lines on a man's forehead is really what sells it for you, then just don't watch the show. Just seriously, just put it down. And honestly, I'm just happy to be a fan that is pleased and that is extremely excited. I'll sleep well knowing that I loved this season, and I can't wait to love the next episode. And everyone else can just, yeah, just complain. It's not like it really matters, because the episodes have been doing fantastic critically, and most criticism, quote unquote, on Twitter and TikTok is just lies, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know how this counts as an editor's note because this is like 7 minutes worth of recording, but yeah, back to your regularly scheduled content. And literally, other than that, I don't know what bad to say about the episode. I thought the animation was great. I thought the choreo was great. I thought the music was insane. I thought the voice acting was crazy. I loved all the big moments and especially that ending. I promise you this show is fantastic and this episode is fantastic when there isn't an annoying guy in your ear telling you otherwise. If you haven't already, go check out my reaction to the episode. And if you made it this far into the episode, I cannot wait for next week. What did you guys think of the episode? Are you excited? No, you are excited. Just get excited with me. Let me know your thoughts. And I cannot wait for next week. It is going to be crazy.
What you did was not nice!
Alright, so we're finally at the moment. Invincible versus Conquest has graced our screens. And I can confidently say that it is that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's incredible. I'm not saying Invincible. Since the first time I've watched Invincible, I instantly knew about Conquest, and everyone's been talking about Conquest. And now that we're finally here, this was arguably in my top 5 favorite episodes of TV ever. An insane way to end off a finale that genuinely shuts up any allegation thrown against the show. And what's even funnier to me is that this just feels like an appetizer to the rest of the show. I have an incredibly strong feeling that we're only gonna go up from here. I owe Jeffrey Dean Morgan an apology because his performance was generational. I can't even believe that I slightly doubted this man because he added an entirely new layer to Conquest's character. Just the fun, raspy old voice that he performs throughout the entire episode with highlighted monologues that we will get into. Perfection. Steven Yeun is no exception to this. I feel like over the course of these 3 seasons, Steven Yeun has really understood how to play Mark Grayson, and in this finale specifically, you really get to see it all. This episode doesn't waste any time. Pretty much half of the episode, or more than half of the episode, is Mark versus Conquest. And you really get to sink your teeth into the fight. The episode doesn't try to annoy you with any other side plot or anything of the sorts. They keep you in the fight and in the moment. And speaking of moments, there are way too many to count. I could seriously argue that there are easily the best moments in the entire series in just this one episode. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but this is easily the best fight in the entire show. It really couldn't get any worse for Mark. You know, you'd think that alternate versions attacking your Earth would be the worst thing that could happen in the year. But then Conquest decides to show up. And then from on, we get what I consider a peak episode of television. Just look at this. Look at this. Look at his hair. Look at his body. Look at the way he moves. Jesus, man. Conquest hit him so fucking hard that the budget of the show went up. Look, I usually really enjoy the animation in the show. I never really complain about it. Hell, I would consider it good. But this episode really knocked it out. So many great moments that are just wallpaper worthy, and so many great moments that will stick in your head till the very next week. But obviously great moments aren't just made by the moments themselves, they're also accompanied by the characters. Conquest is such an interestingly fun and very scary ass character. So like most, I'm assuming all of you probably watched the episode and then read the comic. And don't get me wrong, Conquest in those issues is really good, but the show is significantly better. Now, obviously the main idea of the character is still present in the show, but there's this extra layer added, not just because of Jeffrey Dean Morgan's voice, but because of this one monologue. Like, obviously, it's kind of funny that a beast of a warrior like Conquest is just trauma dumping on Mark, but I've just been thinking about it, and it honestly just changes his entire character in a very good way. And I think that's just a standard for the show. The show has done such a good job with making such significant changes to characters that work entirely for their favor. Moments like these is where Invincible really expands on its source material, and I'm so unbelievably thankful for an adaptation like this. Cause we just went through an entire episode of Conquest being an absolute menace, literally slapping the shit out of Mark and Oliver, who is literally like a 6-year-old child. Like, let's not forget that. And after all that, the show somehow has you sympathizing with him. It really goes to show you what this idea of like toxic masculinity does to men, and how you're not allowed to be like vulnerable or sensible or empathetic. It's sad and hurtful to yourself and everyone around you, and hearing that from his monologue really, again, I cannot overstate, adds a new layer to his character. Mark Grayson is easily one of my favorite characters in all of comic book history now. I don't know how hard I need to emphasize this, but his bones are literally popping out, and all he cares about is the idea of losing Eve. He quite literally does not care about the physical pain he is experiencing. And after all that, he still screams out for Cecil's help. This season is so unique in its storytelling because you go through this entire moral dilemma for the entire season, and you see Mark going in his ups and downs with Cecil, but when the moment it calls for desperation, he'll go for his last resort, which is Cecil. I know I'm straying away from it, believe me, the fight is genuinely fantastic, but it can't be overstated enough how great the character work is as well. The animation genuinely blew me away because I did not expect them to cook this hard. Just the fact that Conquest pulled this move on Mark goes to show you how you can adapt your source material in a really unique way. I love that Conquest just beats the shit out of Mark the entire episode. It really emphasizes how much of a threat a single Viltrumite is, and you also get to really see that Mark has evolved. Even with his bones popping out, his arm is broken, he is literally in physical pain, he still fights. What a comparison it is that Mark looked like this by the end of season 1, and this is how he looked like by the end of season 3. People like to shit talk Mark and pretend like he gets beat up and like his character hasn't changed, but that is just completely false. This is one of my favorite moments in the entire fight. Both the comic and the show never really explain what Mark wanted to say, but just from assumption, you could easily assume that Mark is either going to tell him like, fine, I'll join you, I'll help you with the Viltrum Empire, or just something along the lines of that. It adds such an extra layer of fear to Conquest, because if he's that powerful for Mark to switch morally, then you know his character is done right. Just that entire last like 10 minutes of the fight, like no words, seriously, my words do not do justice. Steven Yeun, man, Steven Yeun. They literally pulled this moment right from the comics and they nailed it with perfection. Just the emotional weight of it all, experiencing the whole fight and then seeing Mark say it. Holy shit, dude. And it doesn't even stop there. Conquest's monologue for thanking Mark, for thanking him that not only do I not give a shit about anyone on this earth, I just came here to have fun. He did this for fun. Just a comparison between Omni-Man doing this to help the Viltrum Empire and Conquest doing this out of the love of the game, like, oh my god, dude. How can anyone watch this and say it is a 4 out of 10? Look at this. And it doesn't even stop there. It doesn't stop there. Eve finally beats the allegations that she's been getting for an entire week and goes Super Saiyan, literally making Conquest look like a colossal titan from Attack on Titan. But then Mark kills him using his own head. Holy shit. I don't know how much more I can say other than this episode is fucking amazing. Mark Grayson, I feel so bad for you. Mark is such an interesting character, and this episode again shows that. The extremes that this 19-year-old kid, I want to emphasize again, 19-year-old kid has gone through is nothing short but fucking miserable. This is genuinely one of the coolest moments, if not, it has to be just in the top 5 category in the entire show. My words do not do justice to the entire fight. They will never do justice. You have to see this with your own 2 eyes to understand what I'm saying. And somehow it doesn't even stop there. The episode perfectly closes itself off. A lot of loose ends are tied with some stemming loose ends waiting to be closed off in season 4. But most importantly, Mark's arc is finally resolved. Rex's funeral was a great addition to such a sad moment in episode 7, and I'm happy that Rex's death is not overlooked. Debbie and Mark's chat in the hospital is one that just continues to break my heart. Debbie is one of those characters that is so evolved from the comic, and the material she's given in the show, especially in this scene, is some of the best in the entire series. As usual, the season pretty much ends off with a music montage showing you what is left and what stories are going to unfold. So many things to look forward to: Angstrom Levy, the Sequids, Battle Beast, the Technicians, but most importantly, what Cecil's plan is. I love that this still aligns with Cecil's morals as a character, because he will do anything to make sure they win, regardless if it's dangerous or not. But more interestingly is the final scene that we get in season 3. This isn't in the comics, and as someone who knows quite a bit about the comics, spoiler alert, I thought they were gonna give us maybe a tease of Thrag, just a mention of him, anything, maybe even Nolan and Alan doing something, maybe coming to Earth. But no, Damien Darkblood is back, and the season pretty much ends with him setting up a plot line with Mark maybe going to hell. But the true ending of the episode, in my opinion, is Mark deciding that it's time to kill. From where he started in the beginning of the season, fighting against murder, to now ending where he justifies murder. It's such a great character arc. Just a quick editor's note. I forgot to mention this really cool addition that wasn't in the comics, and it's Conquest making a heart. Now, obviously, some might take this the wrong way and think it's just completely weird, but I absolutely love it. It just shows how much Conquest is in for the love of the game and how much his words genuinely emphasize what he's actually going to do. Mere moments ago, he was talking about how I love to feel my fist drenched in blood, and now once he starts bleeding, he makes a heart out of his own blood. Another thing I want to mention is I know a lot of people do dislike Mark's actions and his flaws, especially in episode 7, but his flaws are what make the character so great. Mark is a 19-year-old kid. Obviously, he's going to be bedside with his girlfriend. Who wouldn't? Kids our age are heartbroken with a girl that they haven't even talked to for 10 minutes. And obviously the scale of it all is different. Yeah, the world is having a massacre, but regardless, Mark is a kid and he has faults just like all of us do. And regardless of his flaws, they're what build him as a great character. If it wasn't for the flaws that he showed us in episode 7, the moments in episode 8 would have not hit as hard. But yeah, back to your regularly scheduled content. Alright, so I am gonna do a season 3 full review just like I did for season 2, and that's gonna be a different video. But here are just my overall thoughts of the season in kind of a short summary. Season 3, in my opinion, regardless of recency bias or not, is my favorite season. I love that season 3 is very differently structured compared to season 1 and season 2. Season 1 and season 2 were very much similar in terms of they had the same idea with an overarching threat and kind of a overarching plot. But season 3 kind of does it differently and goes episodic and has an overarching story rather than a threat. And even though when the threat does show up, it's a threat that makes sense because it's one that has been built up for 3 seasons now. If season 1 was Mark trying to be his dad and season 2 was him not wanting to be his dad, season 3 is the in-depths of what it's like to be Omni-Man's son. You really get to see what it means to be a hero, and you get to go into the gray areas of heroism. Season 3 episode 2 further emphasizes that point of what it is to be a hero, and kind of that one quote, you can be the good guy or you can be the guy that saves the world, you can't be both, is one that sticks until the end of the season. Oliver is such a great addition, and I genuinely do love him. Regardless of his psychopathic manners and behavior, Oliver is a character that just continues to double down on his own morals, and he'll continue to fight for what he thinks is right. I love that you never get to see Oliver give up. Even on the brink of death against Conquest, he literally does not care. Even Mark's relationship is one for the books, in my opinion. I've seen a lot of people say they have no chemistry, but if you watch episode 8 and you look at this moment specifically, and you tell me that Mark, after the beating of a lifetime, still doesn't care about that just because of the love he has for Eve, and you tell me they have no chemistry, I will not believe you. Their moments are so highlighted in the season, and I love that you get to just explore them for the entire 8 episodes. As I mentioned already, Debbie is a MVP. I'd still say that season 2 had the best material writing wise for Debbie, but season 3 still did a great job. You get to really see her new family dynamic and what it's like to finally move away from Nolan, and you get to really see what it's like behind the guilt of it all. Rex and Ray's relationship was such an exclusive addition to the show and adds such a new layer to Rex's death. I really wish we got to see more Rex because I genuinely love Rex's character. He was such a good, well-written and redeemed character that his death just felt so painful. Obviously, there's a lot good to say about Shrinking Ray, like she is finally a character in the show unlike her comic counterpart. Cecil and Mark are easily my favorite characters this season. Cecil is, again, continues to be one of the best characters in the entire show. He's such an interesting man in the fact that you don't always agree with his ways, but you agree with why he's doing it. And I just love that we get to know more about Cecil and his origin. That origin still is some of the best content of the entire season. And obviously, do I have to say anything about Mark? Like, do I need to replay that monologue to you?
I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how fast you are. I can see the future. You don't live to see tomorrow.
Do I need to show you this moment over and over again before you guys understand that Mark is a fantastic character? The villains this season are top tier. Whoever lined up episode 6, 7, and 8 back to back deserves a promotion of a lifetime. It's so hard for me to pick who's my favorite because I think they're all fantastic. Powerplex is such a sad and broken character, and you get to see such a monumental moment have an effect 2 seasons later. Angstrom Levy is an interesting character, and I want to know more about Angstrom Levy, but he's held by so much hate that you never really get to see another layer other than just hate. Conquest is a sadistic, interesting, crazy, fun, incredibly weird, and beautifully written villain. It is genuinely the hardest competition between Powerplex or Conquest in my opinion. All 3 of these episodes are MVPs of the entire show, and no one can convince me otherwise. Obviously, the season does come with its flaws though. I think the season does take a bit of a detour sometimes, specifically episode 5. I thought at some point maybe episode 5 would mean something by the end of the season, but it doesn't really have much of an effect. All the characters in that episode aren't really important at all. I'm sure they'll be mentioned later on sometime soon, but I would have wished for episode 5 to be shorter just so we can also put in another storyline in it. Obviously, at times the animation can take a bit of a dip in quality, but when the moments matter the most, that's when the animation really looks fantastic. And when I say moments matter the most, I'm literally talking about the entire Conquest fight. This season genuinely felt like Mark getting the blue suit, which is basically the equivalent of the symbiote suit, and you get to see that darker side of the entire story. I can't overstate enough how good this season was and how, in my opinion, it is the best season of the show. As usual, the show stays consistent with its character writing, its big moments, its emotional moments, and even the bigger moments. Overall, fantastic season. This finale was fucking phenomenal, and it feels like we are building towards something really cool, and I love that we shift towards a much darker side of the story now. And I'm very curious to know how the story unfolds in the next season. But now you guys let me know, what did you think of the season? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere around the middle? Anything and everything down in the comments below. And please do not send comic spoilers, or else I will find where you live and I will take everything that you love away from you. Thank you.